Welcome back to the rat-infested Torana factory. Let's make some fuel lines. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Since last episode, we've been tinkering around with a few things off camera. Woody came over and had a few squashes and put the front end back on, all the sort of the lights and the grille and the bumper bar and everything. Along the way, he converted the threads to industry standard metric from some old Imperial thread just to...
You're not meant to tell that.
Why?
Because it's dodgy.
No, it's not. Metric for life. So that's all bolted back on again, fits all right. The grille looks amazing.
Nope.
What else have we done? Oh, we've plumbed up the cooling system, which is not much of.
Well, you said that last time, but
It's basically just got a top and bottom radiator hose and that's it, because we've deleted all the heater circuits and all the other circuits that it had. It's not a water-cooled turbo, so it doesn't need any of that stuff either. So it's pretty plumbing-free so far. But that will change today because we're going to make some fuel lines and probably the turbo feed and return as well while we're at it.
What do you do with the oil feed on this side of the block here?
There is no oil feed.
There's an oil bung down there or something, isn't there? Or is that coolant? There's one with tape over it right next to the oil filter. Is that just nothing?
It's the oil pressure switch.
Ah, yeah. Didn't even think of that one.
Science.
Go fast bit.
We got our Go Fast bit. FXR reg. It's a -6 unit that we pretty much use on everything. It's a very effective item.
It's been mounted by industry standard to the firewall.
Industry standard firewall mountings. It's got a Golby's, I think it's a Bosch pressure sensor on it that I don't know, it was in the box full of stuff, so Lee must have bought them years ago. There's 2 of them, so I guess the other one's for the oil. So we've mounted that up. It's all ready to start adding -6 line to. So we're going to use 200 series hose, which is Teflon braid. It's pretty much the go-to for, especially for fuel lines, because it doesn't permeate smell, which will be particularly required in this car because there's basically not much separating the fuel tank from the rest of the car.
This is only E85, or
I don't know.
Whatever Lee wants.
Better ask Lee. I'd say we'll probably put a flex fuel sensor in it because why not? It's got a Elite 2500. It can do pretty much everything, so we may as well make use of it. So any more wires. And explain what you did with this feed line here, because that was very close to the firewall, and you explained it last time again, but oh yeah, I sort of half explained it. This is -8, so we couldn't actually get a banjo. That's a -6 banjo, so that the thread on that banjo bolt is the Imperial -6 thread, so you can actually just screw a banjo to it. But because this is a -8 feed on the rail, that wouldn't work. So I got which was one of these.
Wasn't it just the -8? That's
-8 to 6, and I cut that off, put it in the lathe, drilled through it and tapped it to that Imperial thread and sort of made my own banjo.
You're smart.
Fitting. So that works all right. Because we've got everything shoved back so far, all the things are tight. We've also got the wiring loom outlet there, so...
Who put that there?
I believe we put it there because there was someone had chiselled a hole through the firewall, so we wanted to remove that hole. But yeah, in hindsight, it probably isn't the ideal spot, but you get that. So, hose. Boats?
Only on Mondays.
Just hose.
Just hose.
Okay. summertime. Well, it's spring, but it's pretty much summer.
Thought you didn't like using the cutters.
Cutters?
Yeah.
Never had any before.
I remember an episode of the Skid Factory where you wrote off people using cutters and it's better to use a grinder.
See these ones?
Sounds about right, but you'd do something like that.
See that?
Yeah, I know that.
It cuts it everything all at once and doesn't mess it up.
I'll cut you in a second.
Maybe I just need the right tool.
What is up with those bloody upper arm things?
That's the JB welded clearance.
Is that actually JB welded?
Kind of looks like it.
It doesn't look very neat.
It doesn't look real good from underneath. It looks better from here.
What's the verdict? Where you drilling a hole?
I'm thinking here, because there's too much diff bouncing around underneath there to put hoses through the middle of it. Get underneath and have a squeeze. That bit was hidden behind here. Here. Those seatbelt mounts look like they've been added.
Judging by that washer stack, I think that might be aftermarket. Keep pushing. You're gonna stab me, I think. Ow! Ah!
It's in.
Keep coming.
Yeah. 555 Klondike Nugget for all your performance parts. Industry standard performance parts. Stalker. Old man on the front porch, and that old man is Woody.
Another thing to plumb is the turbocharger. The drain we are using is a Raceworks 52mm drain adapter with a -10 fitting screwed in. This requires some slimming to fit due to the location of a bolt in the compressor cover.
fuel system is plumbed up and complete. Got a BPP rail from Golby's, 1000cc Golby's injectors, Bosch, of course. Also got this little injector harness, which I'm a fan of. Go Fast Bits FXR-6 regulator. We're running a full flow system, so not deadhead like sometimes we do. -6 200 series Raceworks up and back to and from the tank via the regulator.
No gauge on the Go Fast bit?
Yeah, no gauge in this case because we've got a pressure sensor which is going to obviously feed into the ECU. And also it's going to have a Haltech IC7 dash in it, and you'll be able to view basically anything that's in the ECU, you'll be able to view on the dash, so there's no need for gauges, so to speak. And it also have its own monitoring system as well, so if there is a loss of pressure, you can program a strategy to deal with that. We're also going to use one of those for the oil pressure as well. So power capability wise, that's always a thing that people ask. Some people just go for really big lines, and that's fine. Not going to hurt anything. -6 is 3/8 inch. That is in a pressure situation, so I'm not talking about a carbureted car. That's more than enough. I'd probably go like 700 horsepower at the wheels on ethanol on -6. It's a big line. Above that, -8, yeah, that's going to get you a long way. So, yes, you can oversize it if you want, but this is big enough, it's sized correctly, so it's all good. We've used Teflon hose everywhere so far as fuel and oil goes. That is my default these days. I'd rather just use that. There's not a lot of difference in price, in my view, for what you're getting. There's other options though. 100, 200, 400 are sort of the basic series of AN hose. And now's probably a good a time as any to show you what the other ones are and what their purpose is and where you should use them if you wish. So let's go over here and have a look. Woody, over there.
Where?
Over there. We'll just give you a quick rundown about AN fittings and the three main types that we would use in our application, which is performance car stuff. We're not talking about hydraulic lines on dozers and excavators and stuff like that. That's completely different to this.
What about planes?
I think they use a bit better than AN fittings on planes, I hope. Brass fittings, Woody mentioned. Brass fittings aren't really cheap anymore, and they're also ugly, and it's not as flexible as using stuff like this as far as changing directions and that sort of thing. So,
or changing sizes, isn't that with a Christmas tree?
Yeah, the more every fitting you add, same as these really, but every fitting you add adds a heap of money, and it still looks like a ugly Christmas tree full of plumbers stuff. So this is the way we go these days. Obviously it's budget specific. If all you can afford is a bit of pipe and a hose, and go for it. But this is better. So 3 different types. 100, 200, 400 series, 3 different ways of securing a hose and 3 different types of hose. I'll start with 400 series. This is the sort of most basic one. It's basically a barb fitting with a very sharp set of barbs and a specific type of hose that slips over it. Once you push it on there, it won't come off again unless it's torn into 1,000 bits.
No hose clamps needed.
You don't put hose clamps on them because that'll just cut through the hose anyway. So they're machined specifically to take a 400 series hose, that's 400 series. It just looks like a hose, but...
Can you hold them together there?
This?
More the 2 bits of hose.
That's 400 series. This is 598 series. So it's basically an upgraded version of 400. This is a simple type of hose, and this is a more complex, stronger, it's wrapped around with a kind of like a material in a spiral, which helps with its flexibility as well. This stuff will kink a bit easier. So I tend to use the 598 hose where possible. Again, it's more expensive because it's better. I think this is obviously 250 PSI rated. I think this is more like 400.
Where would you use, application specific, where would you use a 400 series line?
So this I would use on an oil drain for a turbo, as long as you don't put it right up on the turbo, because you'll get heat transference through the fitting itself. Same with water fittings. I wouldn't use these for water fittings on a turbo because the heat transfers through the core and damages the hose from the inside. So not for that. Yes, you can use it for an oil fitting as long as you've got an extension of hose, like pipe hanging off the bottom of the turbo. So certain applications that have a long metal drain on them, you can then use this, put your 400 hose on it, which would be 5/8 usually, so -10, and then that would screw into the sump. The reason for that is, look at the angle you can get out of it. It's very tight. You're not going to get that out of a hose, and to use another type, like a screw-in fitting, like a brass fitting or something like that, can be difficult because you've got to screw it in like this rather than having that nut set up. So good for that application. Oil breathers off the top of the engine, perfect for that. There's no pressure there.
Cooling?
You can use it for cooling, yeah. Anywhere but right next to a turbo is fine. It's probably overkill for heater hoses and stuff like that, so I wouldn't really bother with it.
But you can?
But you can, yeah. So mainly low pressure, oil proofing, vapour, that sort of thing. Next one would be
100 series?
100 series. So this is kind of that type of hose, but with a braid around it. So steel braid, that obviously gives it a higher strength because it's a support, but it also uses a different method to actually hold it together. So you have, it's called a cutter nut. So there's a bunch of things inside there that you probably can't see, like a knurl sort of setup.
Please hold, yeah, so I can see that.
That goes over there. This is not the right hose. I wouldn't be able to do it easily if it was the correct size hose. So that goes over there. This pushes into this section here that you can see with the. That actually would pull out of there if I tried hard enough. It seals on there and on this little taper here. Then you tighten up the nut, and it basically just grabs hold of that braid on the outside and holds it against it. So 100 series, or cutter style they would call it if you were to look it up on the internet.
And what do you use 100 series for?
You can use that for fuel, but only if you don't mind having fuel smell. You can use it for water. Again, I would probably not put it too close to a turbo, although it is much more resilient than 400 series. Oil breathers, of course, no drama there.
Oil drain?
Yeah, oil drain would be okay. The only problem with it is, like, you would never use this on an oil feed. It will probably break down and cause, mainly on the oil feed, because usually you have a very small orifice going into your oil feed. So if you get small parts of that hose breaking down, it will block the orifice. So you might only have a 40 thou or 1 mil sort of feed going into the turbo. Just because it's got a large hose going in it doesn't mean that's what the turbo is designed to accept. So that can break down, especially if it's in a vicinity of your exhaust manifolding system and that sort of thing. So drain, yes. Oil cooler, yes, okay. Larger sizes like -16 or 20, you can use it as a radiator hose, which is not really anything that anyone needs except on a drag car where you might have coolant pressure issues and you don't want your hoses to blow off when you're doing 180 mile an hour at the end of the strip. But yeah,
But you don't use 100 series much anymore?
I don't use it much anymore because we just use Teflon or 200 series. Basically, it does everything that they do and better.
Same price?
It's not the same price, but it's not a huge difference.
Yeah.
But also, if you want to keep it in stock or whatever, you only have to keep one type. So it's a bit less flexible in the line, but nothing you can't get past with different types of bend and stuff like that. So the operation of them, as you probably would have seen, if depending on how Woody edits this, but we've used it all through the fuel system.
You had a little montage just before.
If you pulled off this sheath, it's just basically a Teflon tube. But the Teflon tube is not going to bend without wanting to kink. So the braid is to support it and make it conform to where we want it to go and not kink over or anything like that. So yeah, you basically put this nut on there. Again, it's not the right size, otherwise it would be very difficult. Peel back that, open that up properly, put this in, we'll show you later. The sealing surface is there. That's a very, very, very accurate fit. And then
the ferrule is like a compression.
The ferrule or the olive or whatever you want to call it. It's basically the cutter type thing that has in the nut. And yeah, tighten it all up.
We'll do a line.
It's high pressure.
We'll make a line. And
high temperature. Does not allow vapor smells to come through if you're using it in a fuel application. Like in this application where the fuel tank's in the boot, and so are much of the fuel lines, or you've got a surge tank in your boot. This is the only way to stop fuel smell other than solid fuel lines. So this is the best option for that. You can use it straight onto a turbo cooling, water cooling plus oil feed. So as I said, as you go up the line, this one does everything, that one doesn't, and that one does less. So we've just sort of defaulted to using this stuff now.
Let's do a how to make a line and then get back into doing more stuff.
All right.
Oil feed.
Oil feed line we're going to make. We've got some fittings and some hose there. I'll probably just show you the one.
Yep.
One of them. Working with this 200 series is a little bit more difficult than some things, but it's still very doable. You just got to sort of, again, practice and think about what you're doing. So to start off with is, as with any hose, you need to choose your fittings and your hose path first. So you need to go, okay, I'm going to put that there, and this is where the hose is going to go. That's going to change with every vehicle and every application, but that needs to be sorted out first.
You can get different angled fittings.
You can get straight, 30, 45, 60, 90, 120, 150, I think, 180. I never really use that sort of 180 sort of stuff, rarely in some applications, but sometimes when it's super tight you will need to fiddle around with angles, but get that sorted first. Then your hose, when you cut it, these are the proper cutters. You can see it sort of comes around and cuts it from all the way around. That reduces wrecking the Teflon. Normally you would wrap some masking tape around it, and that stops this from flaring out, because it naturally wants to do that. You need to put your nut on, and once that flares out you just can't. So wrap that around there, have everything ready. I then cut it, peel that off, and quickly put the nut on. Then you're right. Once it's on, it doesn't matter. So then you can allow it to spread like that, straighten out the Teflon, then your ferrule or jar rule.
Ferrule?
Ferrule.
Word of the day. Has to be word of the day.
Ferrule?
Word of the week.
Ferrule. How did you say it?
Ferrule.
This thing goes on there. It goes in between the braid and the outside of the Teflon. It's got a little seat that it sits in up under here, so you've got to sort of push it in. Sometimes you've got to go like this and do it. When you're done, it ends up like...
That was also what that thing was for.
Yeah, but I just use that to straighten out the inside. But
that's what the finished product looks like, yeah?
That's what it looks like when you're ready to put it over the fitting. This is the kind of fiddly part. You can't sort of ham-fist it. It's got to be a very neat fit. Sometimes it works easily, sometimes it doesn't.
And these are steel fittings out on these ones?
This is steel, yes. Normally, as I said before, below
and lube is key.
Aluminium fittings, you must lubricate them. They will gall up really badly. It's not so important with steel fittings, but still, I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Just use some spray grease or whatever just to lubricate the thread. Very, very important on aluminium fittings. They will rip themselves to bits if you don't put some sort of lubricant on them. Sometimes you leave that loose until you get your rotations and stuff sorted, like on the turbo, because if you've got 290s...
And the hose likes to go a certain way too, yeah?
It does. It goes the way it was curled up, basically. You can straighten it out, but it takes a while. So usually you just work with it. So that's on top of the turbo. That would go down through and onto the block, which is going to have another 90 on it. The more 90s it is, the more...
Flow paths?
No, not flow paths. It just makes it easier to make it fit.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to get Dr. Carl on us with some science there.
Nah. It's very little... turbos don't really need much oil going through them at all. That's a bit of a myth. Oil-cooled definitely needs more because it's using the oil to take heat out of the core. Water-cooled turbos don't need... They need very little oil flow. So...
Don't go into that. Leave it.
I won't. We've worked out our path for the hose. It does pass near the exhaust manifold, of course. They rarely don't. So that's why we use Teflon for a start, but we're also going to put fire sleeve over it, which gives you another layer of protection. And also, when you tighten everything up, you can manipulate the hose to the path of which the hose takes. They're,
so this turbo is also only oil cooled, as you mentioned before.
Yes,
this is not a water cooled turbo. No.
So that's the oil outlet where my finger is there that I've screwed in already. We're going to put another 90 degrees on this, and that's the sort of path the hose is going to take, with some fire sleeve over it.
Do you want a pen to mark it?
I reckon I'll just do it by special powers. The special tool is handy, but just a tapered sort of well-machined thing like this, it's just a centre punch, is also good to straighten out the hose. To straighten out that Teflon there.
After it's been cut, yeah.
These AN fittings, if they're actually AN standard, will all be imperial. So when you're tightening them up, imperial spanners like that, 9/16. Obviously I'm using normal spanners because they're steel fittings, so you don't need to use the aluminium spanners. On the alloy fittings, you can get these kits.
Where's the shifter? That's the best one.
I find the shifter and just a set of these 8Bs is the best thing, because you can just use the shifter for hanging on, because these sizes tend to go up and down with the nut and the other nut and the other nut and all that sort of thing, so they vary. They've got like different, well, they've got B nuts and S nuts, as it says on the shifter.
So
But if you get these are the actual thing that you undo all the time when you're taking them on and off, and the S is like these parts here from when you're assembling it.
The main thing with the spanners though is that they're alloy to not scratch. Is that the correct thing?
Yeah. They get brutalised a bit, and if you're trying to make it look nice, I mean, they'll probably end up getting brutalised eventually if you're pulling them on and off all the time, if you've got like a Subaru or something that's blown up all the time.
You like Subarus, bro?
So it doesn't mean they don't blow up all the time. So they probably end up looking ratty eventually, but they're going to be a lot less ratty looking if you use these. And also, you don't need to do them up to £1 billion. Like you can just about hand tighten them and they don't leak. They're that well machined, and like they're a good thing. So don't overdo it, and you probably won't wreck things. This fire sleeve's probably technically too big for this hose as far as the way they were presumably designed, but I tend to use looser fire sleeve if I can. For a start, it's easier to get on, but it also gives you an air gap in between what you're trying to protect and where the heat's coming from as well, which is also a good thing.
Mention the air blower thing when it is too
if
tight.
you're struggling to get these on, you can shove the air blower up here and it'll blow up because it's like silicon. That allows you to slip it on. It's usually a two-man job, but
we did that with the brake lines,
didn't we?
All right, so now that's
this
done.
stuff is gold. Buy it. It's the good stuff.
Now that's done, what do we move on to working on now then?
So next we've got to put some battery cables, alternator cable, that sort of stuff in. I'd like that to all be done by the time we get to the actual wiring of the engine and fixing the car's wiring, so we don't get to the end of it and go, yeah, let's start it and find out we've got no battery cables.
Where's Lee also? Isn't he meant to be shouting lunch?
Where is Lee? He's in Wham-Uran!
Making battery cables is a very easy task when the correct tools are used. Al prefers to run the positive lead through the inside of the car rather than externally. If it's good enough for other car manufacturers, then it's good enough for Al. Grommets are used wherever the cable passes through the body, and the cable is also insulated for an extra layer of protection. The positive cable is ran to a firewall pass-through block on the passenger side of the vehicle, which is the same side as the starter motor. The negative cable is earthed through the body of the vehicle.
Fuel system's done. Turbo's got oil in and out. Battery cables are done. Alternator. I think we're done for the week. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next week when we get stuck into engine management wiring. You keen for that, Woody?
I'm keen to start it up next week. How about that? Look at that 8-ball. Can we start the car next week without Lee here?
I plan to.
Maybe that's some motivation for him to get his ass up here.
Jerk.
Maybe he's sick of shouting lunch.
He's hanging around at Millsy's house.
Is he?
I think so.
Anything?
No.
Usually you come up with something in like 2 seconds.
Writer's block.
Do it. Think of a name, put a factory behind it.
Welcome.
Bow, 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 bow.
Welcome back to the 15-year-old Porsche factory.
If you want to tell the viewers that you bought a Porsche, sure.
What's the point of owning one if you don't tell people you got one?
Can we put it in the thumbnail or not?
No. It's an SUV, bro.
Is it going to be on the skid factory or not?
Not unless it blows up and I have to fix it. So maybe. Oh, it's hot.
Oh, come on.
Are you rolling?
Yeah.
Told you I got nothing. You got a door, you got a gym. We got flags. We got turbo flags. We got t-shirts. We got caps. Click here, here, and here.
Where does the accent come from?
Steak knives?